be willing to get on WhatsApp and answer your questions, but we didn't have any takers because they're just like you and I. They, speaking a foreign language to a bunch of people over the phone. It's hard enough to speak over the phone, much less a foreign language. But Angela,
yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, Melissa, oh my goodness, she wrote a bunch of stuff out. And I may have to translate because not in translating it to English, but what they mean by what they say, because they use different word groups than we do. So why don't you tell us what Angela, because Angela has been praying for how many years for a church there in Manfredonia?
Over 10 years.
Over 10 years, yeah, she's been praying for a church. So Conchetta hasn't written anything, nor Daniele, but we'll see. Here, I'll let Melissa speak.
Okay. Okay, Angela says, prayer request, people of God. The course of change inside the evangelical churches here, which look from the outside, unfortunately, more like a cult than a church. A church able to talk with and to the community an effective work of the Holy Spirit, spirit of freedom, not only for people who do not know God, but also specifically for people who know God, so that people will not have a double life, which kills most of them silently. And it doesn't help the new generation to think freely with their own mind and heart, fearing to be less saint than others. It's very frustrating when they make mistakes, if they make mistakes. Italy really needs to be shaken.
And this is from Ema.
Oh, okay, yes. Yeah. Angela, okay. That was from Angela. She's in her early 30s, and Ema, I think, is in her late 20s. Yep, I very much agree. Oh, you can't hear me? Okay.
Speak.
So Ema says, I very much agree. Italy really needs to be shaken from its fortresses by the power of the Holy Spirit. We are so weary and drained that sometimes we don't even have the strength to fight anymore.
Let me interpret that. Let me interpret that a little bit so you can kind of know what she's talking about. So in Manfredonia, or in Italy overall, Italy is less than 1% evangelical Christian, okay? In Manfredonia, they have 3 brethren churches. And each of those brethren churches is about, well, one of them meets in a little small room. But just so you'll know, this is the brethren church. The women sit on the right, the men sit on the left, so on and so forth. And everything is about performance. It's not a great gospel of grace. It's about performance. And we tried to get to know the pastors of the brethren church. And I asked,
it's like an evangelical.
Yeah, because we're evangelical and they're evangelical. They're not Catholic. And so we asked them to get together with us and if we could pray with them once a month. They could not stop arguing amongst themselves long enough to pray because of legalistic differences, okay? And they really didn't want to be a part of us because we met with the young people who are non-believers on the beach and had a bonfire, and they were swimming together for one thing, and a lot of the kids are smoking, but these are all atheists. We're reaching out, to atheists who need the Lord, and they are not happy about that. We also would do what I would do on about once a month, and we're trying to get a room where we can do this again, is we do a rally. So a rally here in the States, the way we would do it is we would get in a car and they would have specific directions for driving, and along the way they had to do certain things, sort of like a mixture between driving and it's a driving scavenger hunt, if you will. So they had to follow the directions. So we would do that with the kids, would walk through town and have to do that. We invited, the kids from the Brethren Church to do that, but to join us in it, but they would not do that because there are unbelievers involved in that. So that's kind of the background. And you have to know in Italy, if you're the oldest it's a patriarchal society. So the oldest person in the room, they have all the wisdom. And everybody else needs to shut up and listen to the oldest person in the room. Whether he's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. They're automatically right because they're the oldest person in the room. So the young people have no ability to say anything. They are not allowed to speak. Their ideas are not important. And especially in a legalistic church, you cannot say anything. And so we open the room every Thursday night to do our games, and we allowed the young people to speak. And because we wanted to...
For their voice to be heard.
We want their voice to be heard. Tell me, you're atheist, so tell me why you're atheist. Let's discuss that. And does your atheism, how does it look compared to the gospel of Christ? And it's been very effective in helping us reach out to unbelievers. And so these are the things that Angela is asking for. She wants a church, and well, let me add one other thing. Angela works for the city of Manfredonia.
Social worker.
So she's a social worker. So she knows what's going on in the families and the people in Manfredonia. Manfredonia is not a really big town, 65,000 people. How many people in Dayton? Maybe about the same size, maybe? 65,000, maybe? Anyway, so it's a relatively small town. What you have to know, in Manfredonia and in Italy, prostitution is illegal, but the mafia runs everything, so there are prostitutes that sit along the highway outside of town. Angela knows that leadership in the church, in the Brethren Church, have been caught out with prostitutes. Yet they live this double standard, and that's what she's talking about, this double standard that they live. They live this legalistic double standard of here's how you have to be, yet she knows that they're going picking up prostitutes during the week. So this is what is going on in Manfredonia, and this is why Angela is praying for a church driven by the gospel that actually deals with the heart of the people and changes what we love, and that we have the freedom to speak out and talk about the things that our struggles, and get them out so we can work through them and put them in relationship with the gospel. Does that make sense? That's kind of the background that we're coming from. Like I say, Angela and Concetta, they live in Manfredonia. Ima lives in Naples, but comes to Manfredonia quite often because she's real close friends with Angela. And these are the strongest believers that we have there. There's 3 of them in Manfredonia. And they've been praying for a church for a long time, over 10 years, asking God to bring a church there. And just so you'll know one more piece of the puzzle, we'll be going, or several things, and just, I'll talk, you guys interrupt me, okay? Just interrupt me with a question. I'm not, I would prefer it that way. But we'll be taking Angela and Concetta up to Turin, Italy, which is up north, up near the Alps, the week after we get there. And the reason is because we know a missionary family there that has a church, and they are part of Calvary Chapel Ministry. Any of you familiar with Calvary Chapel Ministries? Yeah, Calvary Chapel has a church in Chattanooga and just all over the country. Well, Calvary Chapel has a seminary in Montebelluna, Italy, where they train pastors. And so we're going to Turin to talk with them, and this pastor is part of that group, so we're seeing if there may be a pastor, if there is a national pastor that would be willing to come to Manfredonia. We're, just to let you know where we're at, with Melissa's health problems, and she has, her mom's in her mid-80s, and she has no one else to take care of her in Chattanooga. Fortunately, I have my sister that took care of Mom when I was gone, but she has no one to take care of her. So we've talked with our mission board, and you all need to know this. We'll be coming and going to Manfredonia. Staying for 2 years at a time is just simply impossible because we can't take care of her mom in that
Praise God,
way.
my health is so much better, so I want to say thank you all so much for your prayers.
That's right. And she does need regular care from her doctor for this. So we can come and go, and our mission board is very happy with that. But even if we were to stay there, our goal is to work ourselves out of a job, right? They need an Italian pastor to come. We are foreigners, and we will always be a foreigner. And they need a national pastor to come into Manfredonia and take over that work, and that's what they're praying for. So we'll be going to Turin, and also they have a couple young ladies that they can make friends with that are believers. But here's the issue that they have in Turin is the same thing that we have in Manfredonia. Italian men will not commit to anything. There is no commitment in Italian men. And I say that as a broad sweeping. Obviously, there are some men that will commit to some things. But as a general rule, they don't. As a matter of fact, the young people follow that. If I invite, for example, if we invite Concetta and Angela, even though they're wonderful believers and they're solid Christians and they're loving, wonderful people, but if we invite them to dinner, they won't commit. They'll say, okay, I'll be there, but they might, an hour before, if something better comes along, they're going to go do that. That's the way it works in Italy. You always have to leave your options open.
Culture, no, I'm just saying that's their culture.
That's their culture. I need to let you talk because you know more than that. But that's their culture. They have to leave their options open for anything that comes along might be better. The other thing is they don't trust anybody, because friendships to them always have another motive. If I want to be friends with you, it's because I can get something from you. And that's the hard thing it is to overcome.
What they love about us coming, too, is because they're like, you're not trying to get anything from us. And we're not used to that. And it's so beautiful. And we're like, we just love you. And we want, to be here to encourage you all. And so, yeah, that's a foreign thing for them.
So it's hard for them to function as just a friendship. That's very difficult for them. So the problem that we have is we don't have, you notice the young ladies that we've got, Ima, Angela, and Concetta, they're very active in our little Bible study. But Daniele is a believer, but he's not active. Matteo claims to be a believer, but he's not active. Because there's always something better to do than to be at a Bible study. It's more fun to go to the beach, especially in August. The whole country shuts down for vacation the month of August. So they're going to go to the beach and spend all day at the beach. And why would I come home to be on Zoom for a Bible study? There's no commitment. And that's the hard thing with the guys. And that comes from, and I'm getting into the culture probably, and then I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let you ask questions. The culture it's interesting. It starts as a little child. The elementary school was 2 blocks down and 1 block over from where we live, and we live downtown in the city on one of the busiest streets in the city, and we live there so we can easily get to everything. But it's interesting if we go out in the morning and watch the little kids go to school, because everybody walks to school. It's a small school or a small town. So everybody's walking to school, and here's what you see. The grandmothers are walking, and they're old and feeble and getting really, a lot of them, because Italians, they live a long time. Even though they smoke, and 90% of the people I think smoke, but anyway, they live a long time, and a lot of them are feeble, and they'll be carrying a little boy's backpack, but the little girl that's younger has to carry her own. The little boy is prized, and little girls have no value. And so that's this, they're grown up, taught, the little boys, Mama does everything for me. Grandma does everything for me. They don't have to do anything. So there's no commitment to the little boy from the very early age. However, the girls, they're required to do everything. They have to carry their own backpack starting at an early age. And so this is the environment that they've grown up in. And so they don't ever commit to anything. As a general rule, and I'm making a broad sweeping statement, okay? But as a general rule, this is what goes on in the mind of the guys. And that's why it's so hard to get guys to commit to anything as far as in a church. That it goes.
It's interesting because northern Italy functions a little bit better than southern Italy. So when we were talking to the missionaries there and we told them the need and that we were bringing Concetta and Angela, and just to share the need that we need an indigenous pastor, they said, well, we do too. So we're going to be praying together, because they said we cannot get any men to commit. I said, seriously, I thought northern Italy, I don't know, they work, they are in the community more. I just felt like there was more of a commitment. And so, they're there for a while, but they also want an indigenous pastor. And so we've just been praying that it's a calling from whoever this Italian man may be, that he has a calling, the right pastor, that has a calling from the Lord for southern Italy. And Concetta is saying that she might talk to you all in a few minutes. She's trying to get together. I'm sorry, that's what I was talking to her about now. But yeah, it's just, our mission agency asked us to write out like a strategic plan, and I love things like that. I just love putting things together and detailed stuff, and so he was saying, write out, the tactics, the goal, the strategic plan, and the tactics on how to go about it. Of course, leaving room for the Holy Spirit. But so as we've been praying, of course, the first is to ask God to lead us and guide us in prayer and the Holy Spirit to work. And secondly, an indigenous pastor. And one of the things that we want, and I know God can do this, is a church, to build a church. And so that's just here recently, that's really come to be on our hearts. And I don't know, so you all be in prayer about that too. So, yeah.
So does that kind of give you an overview of what we're up against, what goes on in southern Italy? Do you have any questions?
Are there any good churches at all in Italy that you know of?
There is a few, but they're really tiny, okay? They're in Trani, which is about 45 minutes south of us. there's a Pentecostal church, and it seems to be doing really well. And I would say it's a really big church. They probably have at least 50 people showing up. And so that would be a huge evangelical, what I'm going to call it evangelical, because they're pretty solid. They are Pentecostal, which really fits the Italian society. I'm not Pentecostal. Maybe if I was, we would have more people coming. I'm being facetious. But they're very emotional. If you ever watch Italians, I tell this story. When I first arrived there, my best friend there, Mario, I don't know that he claims to be a believer, but he says all religions really come to the same point, and we've discussed that 1,000 times. But anyway, I was with Mario, and I went with him to see. He said, "Go with me to this. I've got to go to this office to deal with this thing," and I wasn't sure what it was. Come to find out, it was an insurance thing. But he's talking to this guy sitting at the desk, and they're just screaming at each other after just a few minutes. And had only been there for a couple months, and I thought, my goodness, I'm in the middle of something. These guys are going to fight, and I don't know what to do. I'm downtown Manfredonia. I don't know anything about anything. And I was really nervous because they were just going at it and hammering each other and just and Mario was leaning on his desk and And so after a few minutes, about 15 minutes of this, they finally quit. And I thought, okay, thank you, Lord, you got me through that. And Mario looked at me, he said, "You want to go get a coffee?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I guess we'll go get a coffee." So the guy gets up, and they take each other by the arm like this and grab me by the arm, and we go get coffee. And I'm like blown away, but that's how they function. And so everything's about emotions. So you can imagine the Pentecostal thing is very emotional, so they're very attracted to that. Up in Ferrara, there is a pastor who is Italian. And he has a good little church there.
That's by the seminary, Montebelluna.
Yeah, it's close to the Montebelluna Seminary. And he is Italian. He's actually married to a young lady that's American. And they have started a church there in Ferrara. And so it's successful.
In Italy, there is a pastor and his wife are there, and they're actually missionaries through our mission agency. The Joneses is their name. So they have a church, Veritas, the Truth, and so they have asked us to come while we're there, and they want Stephen to preach and then to share the need for an indigenous pastor. And there's also an organization that they go through. What is it, honey? It's like a Baptist, but it's an Italian, and they said that might be something, our mission agency said it might be something we want to check out while we're there and be a part of, so that I think they could help with building a church or, different things like that.
How far is the seminary?
The seminary is up in Montebelluna. It's about, if you go by car, it's about 7-8 hours north of where we are. Yeah.
So it's a good.
Yeah, it's up closer to Venice. It's just south of Venice. Yeah.
We actually met a couple of ladies there that are in Turin now, and while we were there, we were asking them to pray for Conchetta and Angela. They're the same age. So they've been praying all these years, and now when we go up to Turin, they're excited to see Conchetta and Angela. Savannah and Amy are their names, so we're going to have coffee, of course, with them when we get there, and it'll be a time of fellowship for the girls.
Are there any other questions? I'll talk too much, so.
I have a few.
Absolutely.
One of the things is the coming and going. Is that going to be a big financial burden? The coming and going?
It is a financial burden. Yeah, because tickets are $1,200 a trip. a piece. So each time is $2,400. So our mission board does want us to go out and raise more support. However, the interesting thing is our mission board is actually glad that we're coming and going and not staying, because how do I say this? They feel like if we stay there, they'll get used to us being there, and it'll make it harder for an indigenous pastor to come in. You see what I'm saying? And they're finding with their other missionaries that when they leave, it helps jolt them into reality that, hey, these are foreigners. We need to get an indigenous pastor. And that's why you see a lot of mission agencies now trying to start seminaries for the believers that are in these countries. You see that a lot in Africa. There's a lot of African seminaries now starting so they can use indigenous pastors. Sorry.
With that in mind, I mean, will you know, what type of limitations, because I know you guys have been here and you communicate with them while you're here.
Right.
You know, obviously besides the natural one of not being there, what type of limitations will that be on your outreach to the community as opposed to being there or being here? I mean,
yeah, what the limitations is we're kind of limited to just the ones that we're close with. When we're there, we can reach out and meet new people. And that's the thing that really gets hard and discouraging for us. We can talk to the ones that we've got, but going getting new people. And that's sad because that whole town is basically atheist. And that's a big limitation. That's the one that just drives me crazy. And that's why it was hard with the Brethren Church, because they really didn't want anything to do with us, because we do associate with the atheists. Because we go out and are friends with them, because we reach out to them and try to reach them. And they do not approve of that at all.
Very closed to
They're very
outsiders.
closed.
It's only,
Yeah.
so they basically don't have any type of evangelistic outreach.
No, not at all.
and the
Not at all.
Catholics and the Brethren Church do not get along at all. So even if we wanted to communicate with the priest, because Stephen actually shared Christ with one of the priests. I'm not saying that they're not all not believers, but it's just allowing God to move, and they're very close to that. Yeah.
Is the Brethren Church a missionary plant?
I think from what I understand, it goes way back for several centuries. Several centuries ago, I don't remember who it was that brought the Brethren Church, but it goes back more to the Quakers and back in that time period. So yeah, I don't remember the years. I know our mission. We've got a new mission board director. Our other director retired, and I had some conversations with him. He was familiar with the Brethren. He said there's actually are some good Brethren churches that understand God and the gospel and God's grace. He said apparently you've got one of the bad ones, but yeah, they come from a long time ago and were established there in Italy. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
The last question I had is what steps, talked about a plan. Are there steps? I mean, obviously the first one is to find an indigenous pastor.
Yes.
But will you guys, because you've been meeting on the beach when you're there, you have those services. Will that, obviously, will that continue? Yeah. And I assume yes, but will you guys try to form a church without the presence of an indigenous pastor, or will you wait till you can find an indigenous pastor?
Yeah, two things. We did even last time look for a place to start a church so that we could meet regularly. The way I define church is it's a group of believers, okay? And this is a situation that we had before where Peppo, the previous, and I want to be careful because he and I are still friends, but we have a different view, and he left because it wasn't happening. He left because the church would not grow. But he didn't have any believers. And this was an issue, and I said, well, you really don't have, you're trying to do Bible studies with non-believers. I'm not convinced that any of, Conchetta came, but Conchetta was dating a guy who was a non-believer. He actually asked us to excommunicate Angela from the church, that's another story in itself. And because some guy that isn't a believer during one of the services got into an argument with her. So it was automatically Angela's fault because she's younger and he's a male and he's older. You see the convolution of things. So yes, the answer is our ultimate goal, and we want to start a church. We have 2 solid believers that we know. We know Daniele has given his life to the Lord, but he's not committed. And he comes and goes, to the Bible study at will. Matteo is the same way. So we're really like, God, how do we do this? What is this church going to look like? Right now, it's more or less, and we're in agreement with our mission board. We've really just got a Bible study. And we need to get the foundation so that they will go out. And it's interesting because I'll be speaking with Philippians, but it's ladies there in Philippi. We look at 2 ladies were getting it going there in Philippi, and then they became a church. And so that's kind of what we're hoping for happens here. Now, also, just to add to that, Angela, working for the city, is getting us a room so we don't have to pay a monthly rent. That's kind of a goal? Because she has access to what they call a science lab outside of town. A co-working lab. And it's built for training people. We can get a room for 1 or 2 days out of the week. And that's what we're hoping we can get that room, so we don't have.
We can't have church there, but he can teach the critical thinking classes,
and so
like he was doing before.
And that's our outreach to the unbelievers. And so there are, and I would like to mention, for example, Pasquale. I meet with Pasquale 2 or 3 times a week for coffee. Non-believer, he was an atheist, went from atheism to agnostic. Now he's telling me about Jesus Christ. In our last conversation that I had before we came back, I said, Pasquale, would it be fair to say that you're a follower of Jesus Christ? You're telling me everything about Jesus Christ and what he says to be true. He said, I'm not quite there yet. And so this is what the outreach means to the community. We've worked for several years to bring, and this is the thing that drives me crazy about not being there all the time, is Pasquale Marco, who is an atheist. But the other day, when we asked him about something, he said, well, I'll be praying for you. There's Pierangelo, he's the best pizza maker in town. He has a pizzeria, him and his wife. He made it very clear when we first came there, I don't believe in God. There is no such thing as God. And now he tells me he's praying for me. So this is, yes, we're hoping these people do come to Christ. Our prayer is that these people do, and we can then form more than a Bible study, but become a church. Yeah. Does that answer the?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And I'll send you our grid thing that we sent to the mission agency.
Yeah,
that
that
kind
would
of
be good
explains like the goals and
What our goals and our goals and tactics to get there. This is what we've sent. Yeah, we'll provide it. We'll send that. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
The Brethren Church,
Uh-huh.
Is it all Italians or was it started by a missionary?
They're all Italians. I think, obviously, if I remember correctly, there were some missionaries long ago that came and brought that to Italy, but there are no Americans involved in the Brethren Church that we are familiar with. Yes, ma'am.
This is a strange question, but Hannah and Jimmy and Jed have learned how to say, I have a friend who loves me in Spanish. Could you tell them how it sounds in Italian?
Io ho un amico che lui mi amo. I have un amico. That's the same as Spanish, right? Amico. Io ho un amico. I have a friend that que mi amo, loves me.
Can you say it in Spanish, one of you?
We sing it in the song. Okay, and can you say Jesus is his name?
Ok. Il nome di lui è Gesù. Il nome, the name of him, de lui, è Gesù. It's Jesus. È Gesù. Gesù. Yeah, Gesù. Uh-huh. It's Spanish-speaking people and Italians can usually communicate because there are a lot of similarities. Yeah. It's the thing that gets crazy in Italian is a conjugation that Spanish doesn't have. Spanish has the conjugation, but it doesn't, and I'll shut up because it must be time. But I'll give you this example, and this is what makes Italian so hard. The word for to eat in Italian is mangiare, to eat. They conjugate that verb 96 different ways. So every verb has 96 different conjugations. So it gets crazy. And then add to that, when I go outside of Manfredonia, they have their own dialect. For example, ci vediamo is we'll see you later. Ci vediamo. The dialect of Manfredonia, they say ci vedum. That's their. If I go to another town, they have another dialect, and it's totally different. So I can't use the dialect that I learned.
He does much better with the language, so you all pray for me because by the time I've figured out what to say, they've moved on to something else.
So it gets the language is one of the most difficult to learn.
Okay.
Because and we need to quit. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to transition now. Sunday school is concluded. So we'll go ahead and take a break, and then we'll have the Gustafsons here the rest of the service. So thank y'all for being here.